Welcome back to YogaSteady Studio, an original hot yoga podcast for hot yoga teachers, longtime and new students, and especially skeptics. If you want to be challenged in your practice or you want to challenge the mystery behind the power of this practice, you are in the right place. I'm your host, Jennifer Rochelle, and today we're talking about discipline. Yeah, the kind of discipline that gets you to your mat, but specifically the kind that shows up in how we teach, how we talk to students and each other, and how we grow or fail to grow over time. Recently, a viral TikTok reminded the world that some of the old habits in our hot yoga community are still alive and well, and not necessarily in the best way. Let's get into it. So here's what happened. In early April, a TikTok by the username at the real SAHD, a lifestyle influencer known for documenting her routines and wellness habits, went viral. In the video, she shares how she attended a hot yoga class at a well-known studio in New York City. About halfway through class, she took a sip of water. The teacher stopped the class to call her out, saying, quote, "You drink water when I say you drink water." Naturally, she was stunned. She got up, left the class, and then took to social media to share her experience. That moment struck a nerve. The video racked up millions of views, igniting a wave of conversation across the yoga world. Some people defended the teacher, saying this is how it's always been in hot yoga. Others were outraged, calling it outdated, toxic, even abusive. Eventually, the teacher was let go. The studio issued a public apology, clarifying that hydration is essential and that instructors are expected to support student needs, not shame them. Now, whether or not you agree with how that moment was handled, it raises an important question. What do we mean by discipline in the hot yoga room? Is it control? Is it restriction? Is it blindly following a teacher? Or is it about building trust over time? Let's go there. Discipline has always been a key seed in the original hot yoga, but let's be clear, it wasn't always planted in the healthiest soil. Many of us were trained in a lineage that likely began with a sincere desire to honor tradition and do things the right way. But over time, the leadership model at its core shifted, emphasizing rigidity, rote repetition, and control. Bikram Chowdhury stood at the center of that model. He said shocking things to get his point across. He'd interrupt students mid-posture. He'd embarrass people in front of a room. And many of his students, myself included, loved it. Not because of the rudeness, but because somehow that fire lit something up in us. The discipline felt like part of the transformation. His harshness felt like love and strength. And in a way, it was, but that's not the whole story. While his approach inspired deep loyalty in some, it also left little room for feedback or shared leadership. Over time, that refusal to receive honest reflection created an environment where it was a challenge to give and receive constructive criticism, and where teachers began to mimic his tone more than his method. And here's the problem. Without oversight or feedback, that tone becomes normalized. It becomes part of the teaching persona and allows for statements like, "Oh, that's just how she is. He tells it like it is. They're old school." And so the glibness goes unchecked. The snark, the ego, the tone that's more about power than presence. But let's pause here for a moment. This isn't just a call out of individual teachers or individual teaching tactics that don't work. It's a call out of a systemic issue. It's about leadership and it's about feedback. Because new teachers don't just invent this stuff out of nowhere. They learn it. They copy what they see. And if the senior teacher or studio owner isn't modeling healthy behavior or isn't making time for their feedback, then what gets passed down isn't discipline, it's dysfunction, dressed up as tradition. So let's talk about what actually breaks the cycle. Not performative apologies, not more rules. Feedback. Real, consistent, actionable feedback. And not just for new teachers, for all teachers, even the rock stars, even the studio owners. In a healthy teaching environment, new teachers learn best when they're guided. Mentorship happens through observation, conversation, and accountability. Senior teachers lead by example, by demonstrating how to treat people with clarity and respect. Most beginner teachers copy what they see. They're up on a podium, nerves buzzing, dialogue in their head, managing the room, holding space. And if they mirror a senior teacher's tone or style, it's because that's what was modeled. That's what got attention. That's what looked like leadership. But what works in the short term isn't always what serves in the long term. And what they're observing is relationships, not technique. And when experienced teachers stop receiving feedback, things can calcify. Language gets lazy, tone sharpens, and the culture quietly shifts to, that's just how he is. She's so old school. Or they've been doing it that way forever. It doesn't have to be that way. When feedback is part of the culture, when it's consistent and safe and expected, teachers evolve. They refine what's working and release what's not. They stop hiding behind personality and they start teaching from presence. That kind of discipline isn't about control, it's about commitment. A commitment to the students, a commitment to the practice, a commitment to themselves, and to the principle that no teacher, no matter how seasoned, is ever done learning. Okay, I want to tell you a story. Years ago, I taught a large class at the old Bikram Yoga Alexandria. In the room, there were about 15 of my teachers, all Bikram trained. Some of the teachers I had struggled to mentor, but I never really could figure out why. Oh, also present was Diane Descharme, a senior teacher in the original hot yoga world known for her deep roots in the lineage and her direct, no-nonsense style of feedback. After class, we all sat down together, myself, Diane, and the team of teachers who had attended the class. And Diane gave me feedback. Real feedback, honest, detailed, unfiltered. And it was hard. I felt exposed. I felt vulnerable. I felt all the things that rise up when someone you respect holds a mirror up to your teaching. But here's what also happened. That moment shifted everything. I have never been the same teacher since. My teaching became more precise. My listening got sharper. My ego for sure took a hit, and I'm glad it did. And even more than that, I watched my whole team begin to change. Teachers who hadn't looked at their dialogue in years started studying again. People began asking me and each other for feedback. Conversations opened up. The performance of our teaching team improved across the board because we all saw that vulnerability wasn't weakness, it was leadership. And I continued to ask for feedback still. That's why I advocate for this kind of feedback. Not to shame anyone, not to control, but to grow. Because when a teacher is willing to sit in the discomfort of being reviewed, they give everyone else permission to do the same. Here's the part that often gets overlooked in these conversations. This practice is for beginners. It always has been. And the longer we teach, the easier it is to forget that. There's a temptation, especially after years on the podium, to make the class sound smarter, to say more, explain more, and in little flourishes to show how much we know. But that's not discipline. It's not even teaching. That's ego wearing a headset. Discipline means keeping the teaching clean. It means staying true to the dialogue, not because we can't think for ourselves, but because our words are tools to help the student access their body, not our intellect. The more a teacher knows, the more responsibility they carry to simplify, to serve the person in the back row who's never taken a yoga class before, to stay clear enough that students aren't confused or overwhelmed by our need to perform. Because clarity is kindness, and discipline means reining in the impulse to impress in order to make space for the student's experience. This brings me to one posture in particular. Let's talk about Savasana. This posture, arguably the most important one in the series, I hear that all the time, is where teachers most often go off script. And listen, sometimes it's beautiful. I've heard poetic cues that soften the whole room, words that landed like medicine. But I've also heard some things, wild claims, vague metaphors, stuff that sounds spiritual but doesn't actually help anyone rest. And in a beginner class, that's where we lose the plot. Because Savasana isn't a TED Talk. It's not a chance to validate the practice or prove the teacher's intelligence. It's a chance for the student to receive the benefits of what they just did without interruption. So when the teacher starts to narrate their own philosophy or quote a random wellness author or explain what the body is supposed to be feeling, the posture shifts from integration to interpretation. And I want to be clear about what I think here. That's not the point. The practice validates itself through experience. We don't need to sell it. We need to honor the silence it creates. This is where discipline shows up in its quietest form. The discipline to say less, to trust the method, to allow the student to feel the power of stillness without our voice trying to fill the space. So here's where we land. The real discipline isn't about barking orders or withholding water. It's not about memorizing the dialogue like it's sacred law. It's about how we show up for our students and for each other. It's about being thoughtful with the words we say and having the courage to ask people that you know will be honest with you for constructive criticism. It's about building relationships over time, using healthy, precise language, and creating a culture where feedback isn't feared, it's expected. Because that's how we grow, not in isolation, not in performance, but in community, with our eyes always open, our breathing always normal, and our egos in check. Every teacher, whether new, experienced, or running a studio, needs space to reflect, be held accountable, and stay connected to the actual purpose of this practice. To serve the student, to serve yourself, to keep it simple, and to keep improving. Thanks for listening. Resources for this episode were found on TikTok and the New York Post, and they are all included in the show notes. If you'd like to continue this conversation or train with me or study with me, you can always find me on all social media platforms at YogaSteady Studio or online at www.bikramyogastudy.com. I hope someday we'll get to meet in the hot room. Until then, stay steady, stay curious, and as always, lock your knee. Next week, join me for our episode When Ego Meets the Auction Block. Recently, Alberto Giacometti's renowned sculpture, Large Thin Head, failed to sell at Sotheby's auction for a staggering $70 million asking price. This unexpected outcome has sparked conversations about value, perception, and the influence of ego in high-stakes environments. In our upcoming episode, we'll explore how perceptions of value are shaped and sometimes distorted, the role of ego in both the art world and our personal practice, and what this unsold masterpiece teaches us about authenticity and worth. Join us as we bridge the worlds of art and yoga, uncovering lessons that resonate beyond the auction house and into our daily lives.